In business today, three things to know. First, knockout. From Congress to the state houses, Republicans sweep into office in midterm elections. The GOP victory and what it means for businesses and the economy. And how President Obama may end up supporting some of their goals in return for some of his. Then, for various industries, what's inside the GOP store? We'll look at the sectors that are poised to gain and which ones won't. And meltdown. What's behind gold prices plunging and what that means to countries where commodities are still central to their economy. Arise Exchange starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. A victory lap for Republicans while Democrats lick their wounds and, for the most part on Wednesday, went into hiding. It was a midterm election that saw Republicans sweep to victory in Congress and in many of the governor mansions, while Democratic issues won on the ballot in several states. Voters seem to be sending two messages. They are not happy with Democrats, clearly, but they do like some Democratic-focused issues, such as minimum wage. Late today, the man who will likely be the next Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, spoke. But first, the president spoke, and he urged the current Congress to get back to work.
Congress passed short-term legislation to keep the government open and operating into December. That gives Congress 5 weeks to pass a budget for the rest of the fiscal year. And I hope that they'll do it in the same bipartisan, drama-free way that they did earlier this year.
But we're going to function. This gridlock and dysfunction can be ended. It can be ended by having a Senate that actually, that actually works.
Here are some of the key Senate wins. Mitch McConnell, you just heard him speak, won his Kentucky seat. Pat Roberts held on barely to his seat in Kansas, defeating an independent who was ahead for most of the race. And Joni Ernst, who was one of the Republican women who won, she captured the Senate seat in Iowa, and she may have been helped by her political ad where she talked about castrating pigs. Here it is.
I'm Joni Ernst. I grew up castrating hogs on an Iowa farm. So when I get to Washington, I'll know how to cut pork.
Well, that seems to be the message from voters this year. Castration for animals. A historic first on the House side, too. Mia Love becomes the first black Republican woman elected to Congress. And while Republicans were predicted to win Senate control, they also stormed into the governor's mansions with several key upsets. In blue state Maryland, Larry Hogan pulled off a stunning victory. The state is overwhelmingly Democratic. In Illinois, Bruce Rauner kicked out favorite Pat Quinn. And in Wisconsin, conservative favorite Scott Walker had faced a tough challenge, but ultimately easily won. But as noted above, progressive ideals did win on the ballot. The minimum wage hike was approved in voters in Arkansas, Alaska, Nebraska, and South Dakota. Recreational marijuana is now legal in 4 states, with Oregon and Alaska approving it last night. And Massachusetts voted to keep casinos in the state. James Blue, our Washington bureau chief, is here in our New York City studio to walk us through this election. James, what are Democrats first saying today?
Well, the Democrats are basically saying that, they, didn't get their voters to the polls. And what really happens when large numbers of people don't go to the polls, it does favor more conservative, more likely white voters and white candidates. And that's why the Democrats are saying they just didn't have a ground game. They didn't deliver.
And we kept hearing about the strong Democratic ground game. We saw that in the last presidential election. The Democrats really came out. Is there sort of second guessing today, the Democrats distancing themselves from President Obama? Is there second guessing that President Obama sort of put immigration in his back pocket and didn't push it until after the elections?
I think there is a lot of second guessing, but the reality is there was really nothing to sort of... I'm sorry?
There was nothing they could do, or?
There's nothing they can do, but there was nothing that was really galvanizing Democrats to get to the polls. President Obama was very selective in where he was able to go and actually campaign. And just one real note, and which sort of I think is typical of this election. In my precinct, which is an overwhelmingly black precinct in the city of Baltimore, on election morning, there were no campaign workers, no signs for a black candidate running for governor of Maryland. So when you have a ground game that is that broken in a city where you absolutely need to overwhelmingly bring the numbers up, you can really expect that candidate's not going to do well.
Okay, so how is the president proposing to move forward right now?
Well, the president is really, I think, quite smartly saying to the Republicans, do what you can. Show me the agenda that you want to pass. Let's work together. Let's try to find the things that we can do together. They want to work on trade. They want to make college more affordable. They want to work on early childhood education. So I think there is an opportunity for the Republicans to keep their promise with the American people that they can actually govern.
Yeah, and the Republicans have to remember that they really only have a 2-year window here. And so if they are obstructionist, the voters are likely going to punish them the next time around. There are some projects that the president has not necessarily or could support, for example, Republican initiatives where it's not a huge change in policy. The Keystone Pipeline, for example. He hasn't really come out and said no to it yet. He's just been delaying it. Do you think we're going to start seeing some movement on that in exchange maybe for some of his issues?
My sense, if I were in the political wing of the White House tonight, I would definitely try to come up with an agenda that would give both the president and the Republicans easy, early victories to show that they can work together. Keystone Pipeline would be at the top.
Okay, and what else do you think that we're going to look for over the next 2 years from both the Republicans in Congress and the president now?
Well, I think there is going to be a sort of reevaluation of Obamacare. And I think everyone will agree that there are some problems with that massive
And this gives
program.
actually the president an opening, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Because he could say, okay, I could fix these things, and that makes some Republicans happy, while keeping the core of it.
Keeping the core, and also using the sort of goodwill and using whatever happens as a result of compromising to get, early childhood education, to get some of the trade deals that he wants, to possibly get, the whole issue of trying to deal with immigration, trying to deal with the Dreamers. There's a lot that they can do together.
And we have to remember a little history here. When President Obama lost Congress earlier in his presidency, certainly, President Clinton, lost Congress. That really helped President Clinton.
It really gave him what he needed to become and do the things that he wanted to do.
Okay, James Blue, our Washington, D.C. correspondent here in New York today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, following the midterm elections, the markets ended mostly up. Here's a look at the final numbers. The Dow finished up 169 points to 100.69 to 1784. The S&P 500 up better than 0.5%. The Nasdaq did pull back fractionally. Some of the top stocks we're watching today. Tesla announced wins in both earnings and revenues this quarter. EPS was 2 cents higher, even though analysts were predicted Tesla would post a loss. Revenues 2 cents. Shares up 6% in after-hours trading. Time Warner reported it beat earnings expectations in the third quarter. Rising subscription fees pushed earnings to $1.22, almost 30 cents above estimates. Total revenue this quarter came in at $6.2 billion. And donut shop Tim Horton in Canada reporting third quarter revenue of $909 million, beating forecasts. Earnings per share of 95 cents also topped expectations, even though the company was hit by costs related to its merger to Burger King. And taking a look at commodities, gold closing down again, 26.70 to 11.41. We are going to talk more extensively about gold a little bit later in the program. Oil rebounding a little bit to $78.90 a barrel. And the labor market continues to show some ongoing strengthening. ADP says private payrolls increased by 230,000 in October. And the U.S. service sector growth slowed more than expected in October, sliding for a second straight month to its lowest level since June. Wall Street seemed to bet on a Republican victory by pouring more money into GOP candidates. So now what? Joining us is Rory Landesman, president of Platinum Partners. Welcome back to Arise Exchange. A very interesting day. Do you think that Wall Street was looking for and supportive of a Republican victory, and why?
Yeah, so I think they were supportive for a couple of reasons. One is the financial sector in general has bridled at the regulatory activity of the White House and of the Democratic Senate, and so they're looking for a slightly more cooperative twin houses of Congress, at least for the next couple of years. Second of all, I think they understand that what Wall Street really wants is nothing to happen in Washington. And so when the White House is in one party and both houses of Congress in the other party, it's sort of the ideal scenario. I don't think they really care which one's Democratic, which one's Republican, as long as they're different.
It's an excellent point. They kind of like a stalemate.
Absolutely.
They don't want regulations won't get passed, new burdens won't be put on them necessarily.
No news is good news.
No news is good news. So now for the next 2 years, though, what do you think they're hoping will happen, if anything?
Yeah, so I think clearly they're hoping for some kind of rollback or improvement, or whatever you want to talk about, for Obamacare. And I think that was one of the reasons why the elections went the way they did. And so to the extent that maybe the hospitals take on more of the burden, the health insurers less of the burden, you could see some benefits there. In general, I think they'll fight all, I think one of the likely victors are going to be the energy sector. If the president decides to give in on some environmental issues in exchange for other things, that might, I think those sectors probably will rally. They've been taken apart, obviously, because of commodities falling. Really, what's going to drive that is the economy and whether cyclicals rally.
When you look at sectors that may win, is it worth looking at sectors that are heavily regulated? Is that a play that you could do here?
I think that's the number one area. So I generally am negative about financials, but I like financials. If you were looking for a couple of sectors where you might want to make a play based on the possibility that the Republicans are smart, as the previous guest suggested, and actually don't want to be seen as the stalemateers over the next 2 years and want to get some legislation passed while still blocking, let's say, the more leftist agenda that the president might have.
How does this set up Wall Street for the presidential elections, do you think? Because, for example, Hillary Clinton has been seen as a friend of Wall Street, and she is a former board member, of course, of Walmart. But does this influence their decision-making at all?
Yeah, so I think, they have to figure out the Republican Party has to figure out what went wrong in the last 8 years, the last 2 elections. And so I think they're going to be a little more cooperative than you might have thought. Hillary is going to be a very tough candidate for them to beat, particularly because you could probably make a case today for 10 potential Republican opponents, unless he's named Jeb Bush. I mean, if Bush wants it, it's his. If he doesn't, or his wife doesn't, then I could give you 10 names.
Yeah,
and probably
it's wide open.
And so that's very favorable for her. She's going to have almost certainly a huge money-raising edge, and that usually determines it.
Especially if Elizabeth Warren goes against her, Wall Street is going to pour more money into the Clinton campaign.
Wildly. I think
boatloads. Yeah.
It's very hard to imagine that anybody is going to put up a serious challenge at the primary level.
Finally, is there anything historic as far as how the markets react when the Republicans control Congress, or is it really a crapshoot?
It's a crapshoot, and I think other factors are going to be much more important in the market in the next couple of years.
Rory, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
As always. Coming up, the gold meltdown, what falling commodity prices mean for you and for the countries that mine them. You're watching the Rise Exchange. Thank you.
There is a reason Africa is called the new frontier. What was once potential is now an opportunity ready to be seized. Once revered for our resources, today's wealth lies in our people. People who build the cities that shape the future. People who know an idea in one place means business in another. A generation for whom technology means there are no borders, no boundaries. We are the new lions in a brave new world, kings of the urban jungle. And there's a bank that puts the world in our pocket and the future in our hands. UBA, Africa's global bank.
Last week on a Rise Exchange, Janet Yellen and the Fed worked their formula for the economy.
We're only about 2% below the highs for the Dow and the S&P.
There are many interesting races for state governors, which could impact people and business far more. An upstate New York woman managed to get arrested twice on the same day for drunk driving while being dressed up as a zombie. For 2 arrests in 2 hours, dressed as a zombie, Catherine Butler is our favorite person. Watch this week for more. A Rise Exchange. Welcome back to a Rise Exchange. Gold prices fell sharply today as the dollar soared in the wake of the U.S. elections, putting the precious metal on track for its 6th straight loss and a 4-year low. With more on gold's weakness and the impact it may have on gold-producing countries in Africa is gold expert Scott Travers and the author of the Insider's Guide to U.S. Coin Value. Scott, welcome back to Arise Exchange.
Oh, thank you for having me back, Andrew.
Of course. 10 years ago or so, I was told by gold analysts that we're in a 20-year bull market. Did they get it half right and half wrong, or is this simply a temporarily pullback?
Well, I can't speak for the other analysts, but 10 years ago, I would have sold you some $20 gold pieces for maybe $500 a piece, and those coins are worth $1,200 or more a piece now. Yeah, those analysts probably got it half right and half wrong, depending upon whether the glass is halfway full or not.
Okay, so what is driving down gold prices right now, do you think?
There is no sign of inflation.
But there's been no sign of inflation for 10 years.
Yes, but we're also seeing lack of velocity of the currency. And we see a lot of countries who are
What do you mean by lack of velocity of the currency?
In order to see inflation, people have to spend money. We can see all the quantitative easing that we want to see, and unless people actually spend money, go out and buy things.
Prices don't go up.
Prices
and we're not
don't
seeing
go
wage
up. We're
inflation at all.
not, that's correct. We're more or less in a deflationary environment now. And we really need to see some hint of inflation and some velocity of the currency.
However, gold has always been considered sort of a flight to quality. For whatever reason, you could touch it. It has some sort of intrinsic value, whether it does or not.
Physical gold absolutely does.
So there's so many things going on in the world right now to make you jittery. Why not have some gold in your pocket? They used to say you should have enough gold to make a run to the border.
People should have some gold in their pocket, and this is a very dangerous world. And I can assure you that the physical metal, gold, $20 gold pieces, $10 gold pieces, collectible gold coins, are selling very briskly right now.
But
it may be a different world that you're looking at here in a global financial network, on a news program looking at paper gold, GLD, SOV, for
these
silver.
Are gold mining.
Right.
These are gold
Those
mining
are
companies,
ETFs,
gold and silver mining ETFs.
Exchange-traded funds,
As you know,
GLD.
many countries are commodity-based still. While many African countries are moving away from that, they are still tied to it. South Africa, one, for example. How is this impacting them, and what is the future?
This is it's a very sorry affair right now for countries such as Africa that are dependent on gold to fuel the economy. So as we see more mining companies that can't make a profit with gold because their business plan called for gold to be at a higher level for the company to be profitable when they sell the gold, and they're actually selling gold now, some of these companies, for considerably less than what it cost them to produce the gold. It's going to have a negative trickle-down impact on the economy. There are going to be fewer taxes that will be paid. There'll be fewer pieces of machinery that will be bought. The whole economy is going to suffer.
And there's already a high unemployment rate, and that could become certainly much worse. What is your outlook then for the remainder of the year on gold prices? Do you see a recovery or still softness?
Some people I speak to are looking at $850 gold, but I expect some recovery because the trend will be our friend. We'll see a hint of inflation. And equilibrium is the key word here. So as these gold mining companies go out of business or lay people off, they'll become lean and mean. We won't be producing as much gold globally.
They'll start to pull back on the supply.
Right. And when we have a pullback on the supply, it'll meet the demand. Gold prices will start to inch up again. People will regain their confidence, and we will certainly see $5,000 gold within 10 years.
$5,000 gold in 10 years. So we're in that 20-year bull market. Scott Travers, the author of The Insider's Guide to U.S. Coin Values. Thank you as always.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
Time now for our business ticker stories making headlines across the nation and the world. GM is offering early Christmas presents for customers of their cars with faulty ignition switches. The automaker is giving $25 gift cards to retailers such as Amazon and Walmart to encourage owners of those vehicles to bring them in for repair. So far, only 53% of the recalled vehicles have been serviced. And we have two Apple headlines. First, Apple overtakes Samsung in China. For the first time since 2012, Apple beats out Samsung to become the top brand in China. According to the China Brand Research Center, Apple scored the highest on brand awareness and loyalty. Meantime, in Europe, Spotify is now generating more royalties for its artists than iTunes. For the first time ever, royalty revenue from Spotify was 13% higher than Apple's iTunes during the last quarter. This according to Cobalt, a company that collects royalties from musicians. It's worth noting that iTunes sales are down 13% this year as consumers shift to streaming. And emoji diversification is underway. In response to criticism from smartphone users, the Unicode Consortium, there is such a thing, will add 5 more shades to human emoji characters, which are used to express emotions or ideas. The skin tones will be based on the Fitzpatrick scale, which is the standard in dermatology. And the changes will be effective 2015. And remember Eric Cantor? He's still complaining, and that makes him our favorite person of the day. You're watching Arise Exchange.
Well, Arise is the only network that really covers comprehensively the African diaspora. It gives people in other parts of the world of color a chance to know about people here in the United States, us to know about them, and the world to know about us. So it's kind of an educational experience for everybody involved. Getting to know people through stories, through personal stories. You really get a chance to know what people are actually all about, what communities are about. How are we different? But more importantly, what commonalities we all share.
One of the great things about Arise News, it is truly a multicultural global channel that is paying attention to communities of all different kinds, not just here in the United States, not just in Africa, but all around the world. As we're giving a voice to the people that don't traditionally have the kind of a voice that a mass media organization can have. You're getting here at Arise News that you're not going to find at the other networks is a unique perspective, and I think that's part of what Arise is here to do.
Time now for our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention and not for the right reasons. Today, it is a special election edition. Remember Eric Cantor? He was the House Republican Majority Leader who suffered a stunning primary loss to a Tea Party-backed challenger in Virginia. Well, today, he is more a sore loser than ever. Cantor is complaining that President Obama never called him after his loss. He says he got calls from colleagues on both sides of the political aisle, including several calls from Vice President Joe Biden. Well, Joe Biden doesn't have a lot to do, let's face it, but not one from Mr. Obama. And do we really wonder why? Here are some of the things that Eric Cantor had said about the president over the years. First, he blamed President Obama, of all people, for his loss in the Republican Party primary. Not clear on that one. He has accused the president of being, quote, a dictator, after Mr. Obama called Cantor in a private phone conversation to discuss immigration reform. Cantor went on the talk shows to blast the president. The fact is, the two probably don't like each other. So in a city known for its phoniness, maybe a non-call from the president is the most honest part of their relationship. And so Eric Cantor is our favorite person of the day. Coming up, unlocking the science behind Ivy League school admissions. Our corner office is next. You're watching Arise Exchange.
There is a reason Africa is called the new frontier. What was once potential is now an opportunity ready to be seized. Once revered for our resources, today's wealth lies in our people. People who build the cities that shape the future. People who know an idea in one place means business in another. A generation for whom technology means there are no borders, no boundaries. We are the new lions in a brave new world, kings of the urban jungle. And there's a bank that puts the world in our pocket and the future in our hands. UBA, Africa's global bank.
Last week on a Rise Exchange, the nauseating numbers from two iconic brands and whether they have a plan to turn around their businesses. Existing home sales surged to their best numbers. Can the broader markets support that in the real estate business?
When long-term interest rates are low, it's usually a bad sign for the macro economy.
Toys R Us is defending its decision to sell Breaking Bad action figures. The toys come with a detachable sack of cash and a bag of meth. Not real meth, fake meth. Watch this week for more. A Rise Exchange. In tonight's corner office, to say the process of getting accepted into an Ivy League institution is competitive is an understatement. Get this, Harvard and Stanford accepted just 6% of its applicants this year, and experts say these top schools and others are rejecting a vast majority of students that they would have admitted in the past. Admission directors say that the students who they turn down are as strong as the ones that are getting in. Well, our next guest has made a business out of helping students in urban areas get into their schools of choice. He attended Harvard while being accepted to 5 other Ivy League schools. Welcome, Jay Gardner, the founder of the Ivy Key.
How are you doing?
Thank you for coming here. This is very competitive. Why the statistic that so many that they're being choosier at a time when I understand that colleges are competing for students more?
Well, again, right now you're having so many more students just applying to schools. I mean, when I got accepted to Harvard, it was around 8.25%, and now you have. I mean, roughly when I got in, it was about 25,000 students were applying. Now it's up to 30,000. And next year, they're predicting maybe 32,000, but the amount of spots that are available are still remaining the same. So you still have 1,600 spots that are available at Harvard, but just more students applying. So just having a 2,400 or 4.0 is not enough. You know, you have to be a dynamic student outside the classroom.
So now you help students in quote, urban areas get into school. So what is the difference between students in urban areas versus more rural areas as far as their experience in the backgrounds and what these schools are looking for?
Well, again, it's less so about what's going on inside the classroom, because that's something in terms like the SATs, right? That's pretty standard across the nation, but they're looking at what you're doing outside the classroom. So it's about the opportunities that are available at your schools, whether you're talking about AP classes, talking about extracurriculars. Those are things that are really the separating factor, especially now with the apps being just so dynamic and people are using that on such a huge level. Schools are looking for that. You know, back in the day, maybe 10 years ago, you know, computers were just a thing of, oh, you do computers, that's great, you want to get into computer science, but now they're saying, have you developed an app yet? You know,
oh, really? They're asking students, have you developed an app?
Well,
do you have a blog?
Yeah.
Do you know,
at the end of the day, Harvard wants to have another Mark Zuckerberg, right?
Yeah, that's true.
They want to have, instead of just one, they want to have 10, right? And you're having students who are now having dynamic college resumes and portfolios when they're coming to these schools, where they're saying, hey, not only am I doing well in school, I've developed, you know, 3 or 4 apps outside.
So I would think that the public school system, to be blunt, is probably not prepared to handle that because it's a slow-moving process in changing curriculums.
This is true, but you do have a lot more schools adopting things like Coding for America, you know, Coding for Girls, and bringing a lot more coding into schools and extracurricular activities. And you're seeing a bigger push for that, especially across New York as well.
Okay, so how do you work with students? First, when should they show up at your front door? And how do you work with students to get them prepared?
Well, again, for me, it's about a process that starts in 9th grade, right? So I'm making sure you understand the academic part, right? How am I going to do well in school, just on a very base level? But then, in terms of extracurriculars, what am I getting involved in? And then comes sophomore year, when you're talking about standardized test prep, right? My SATs, my ACTs, SAT 2s. And then in junior year, that's really what I call your trading year, like in sports, right? It's extremely important that you're having all your top grades, right? 4.0 across the board.
It's your power earning years.
Exactly, because a lot of students wait until their senior year and then go, okay, I'll make up for lost time. But again, they don't really care at that
point. So with sort of even applicants when it comes to their education performance then, how important, more so than ever, I take it, than the extracurricular, and what extracurricular activities are schools looking at?
Well, they're looking for you to be a leader and also a collaborator, right? So for instance, if you're looking at someone who's the captain of a basketball team, right? Again, you're showcasing that you're a leader, but also you have to collaborate with your teammates or obviously to win the game because one man can't do it. So they're looking for that. They're looking for you to obviously do things that they would love sports related, right? Because there's a lot of collaboration there, but things that are definitely academic, right? Whether you're being student government, right? I was on a debate team, things that you're talking about involving the community. A lot of community service, I think, is very good. And showcasing that you're a real person. I think a lot of times students feel as though as long as they get a 2400 and a 4.0, they'll be fine, but they want to know, what are you doing outside?
What about the sensitive question of whether students can afford this and those who cannot do poorly? When I was growing up, for example, you know, for example, SAT preps, right? You know, how much are you going to spend on an SAT prep, and whether your parents can afford to do that?
Well, again, I mean, for my firm, when we first started, we were basing it, because I went to high school here in the city, and it was all about making sure that education is a right, not a privilege, right? And a lot of times you have a lot of students who definitely have parents who are well-to-do and they can afford the private tutoring, right, the $500 an hour. But for me, I want to make sure just to bridge that sort of gap.
Jay, we have about 30 seconds left. How important are Ivy League schools anymore anyway?
I think it's important.
It's still really important.
I think it's important in terms of the resources that you can be provided for you after you leave. Especially in terms of your alumni base. You want to get into TV, you want to get into banking.
It's the alumni base actually really that's
the separating factor.
The old boys network is still unfortunately so crucial here.
Very much so.
Okay, Jay Gardner, the founder of the Ivy Key. We're going to have you back on because it's an interesting conversation.
Definitely.
Thanks for
Pleasure.
coming.
Thank you.
Tomorrow on Rise Exchange, what's going to be stacking the shelves this holiday season? The hottest new toys and its impact on the toy industry. I hope we have toys here on the show. Let's take a look at the markets once again. The Dow up triple digits, probably a little bit after the midterm elections. The S&P 500 also in the green, and the NASDAQ pulling back just a little bit. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Thanks for watching. We will see you tomorrow.